Live TV, millions watching. And Tom Cruise crosses a line. He mocked her faith. She didn't flinch. What happened next left even the host speechless. Did he really just say that on live television? That was the question echoing in living.
Rooms, phone screens, and newsrooms across America as a jaw-dropping moment unfolded on national TV. A moment so unexpected, so tense, it stopped people mid-scroll, mid-sentence,
And mid-breath. The incident took place during what was supposed to be a routine political discussion show, a live panel featuring celebrities, commentators, and experts talking about the intersection of Hollywood and American politics. Nothing unusual until Tom Cruise and Caroline Leavitt shared the screen. On one side, you had Tom Cruise, a Hollywood legend known for his blockbuster hits, polished public image, and deeply guarded private life. On the other, Caroline Leavitt, a young, fiery conservative commentator, former White House staffer, and unapologetic Christian, a voice many had come to admire for her fearless convictions and no-nonsense delivery. The conversation began playfully, with the host tossing out questions about celebrities getting involved in campaigns and how much influence Hollywood really has over politics. There was laughter, banter, and even a few jabs at each other's backgrounds. But then, the camera cut to a wide shot of the panel, and that's when it happened. Tom Cruise, wearing a tailored suit and that unmistakable movie star grin, leaned slightly toward Caroline. He gestured to the small, gleaming cross hanging around her neck, a simple piece of jewelry, but one that clearly meant more than fashion. With a smirk, he asked, "Is that necklace part of your costume, or are you just trying to get attention?" Time froze. In that instant, everything stopped. The studio audience went silent. The panelists stiffened. The hosts, caught off guard, didn't know whether to laugh, intervene, or change the subject. But across the country, from New York lofts to small-town kitchens, viewers were stunned. Social media feeds lit up. Phones buzzed. People turned to whoever was nearby and asked the same thing. Did he just mock her faith? Tom Cruise wasn't just making an offhand comment. To millions watching, it felt like an attack on something sacred. For Caroline Leavitt, that cross wasn't a prop. It wasn't a style statement. It was a powerful expression of faith, identity, and the values she stood for publicly and personally, and she didn't wear it for applause. She wore it because she believed in it. What made the moment even more intense was the setting. This wasn't a private dinner or a backstage conversation. This was live television with no edits, no filters, and nowhere to hide. Every word, every expression, every heartbeat was captured in real time. And then came the million-dollar question. How would Caroline respond? Would she brush it off? Would she try to laugh with him? Would she stay silent to keep the peace? No. She didn't flinch. Caroline Leavitt sat up straight, locked eyes with Tom Cruise, and calmly, but firmly, responded in a way that no one expected. What she said would soon be played, replayed, and analyzed by millions. But in that exact moment, all that mattered was that she stood her ground. It's rare to see that kind of composure under fire, especially from someone as young as Caroline. But that's what made it all the more powerful. She didn't get emotional. She didn't lash out. She didn't stoop to insults. Instead, she chose dignity, clarity, and courage. As the tension in the studio thickened, people leaned forward in their seats. Even those who disagreed with her politics couldn't help but admire the way she handled the heat. Because what Tom Cruise may have intended as a playful jab or sarcastic remark turned into a defining moment, not just for Caroline, but for millions of Americans who feel their values are often mocked, dismissed, or sidelined. And while Cruise might have expected a flustered reaction or awkward silence, what he got instead was a reminder. Faith is not a costume. It's a conviction. What happened next would ignite a firestorm online. The clip would go viral. Hashtags would trend. and the cultural conversation around faith, fame, and freedom of expression would be reignited in ways no one saw coming. But in that crucial moment, before the headlines, before the trending tweets, all that mattered was one woman, one cross, and one powerful reply. Before we dive into how Caroline responded to Tom Cruise's on-air jab, a moment that shocked viewers across the nation, let's take a step back and talk about who she really is, because this story isn't just about a necklace or a celebrity clash. It's about a young woman who represents something far bigger than herself, and why her response meant so much to so many people watching. Not just another face on a panel at first glance. You might think Caroline Leavitt is just another media personality, a talking head among dozens that appear on cable news. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Caroline Leavitt is a rising star in conservative politics. She's sharp, confident, and articulate. But more importantly, she's grounded in conviction. At a time when political messaging often feels scripted or hollow, Caroline brings something rare, genuine passion and personal faith. She first made national headlines as a spokeswoman for the Trump administration, becoming one of the youngest people ever to serve in a senior communications role at the White House. From press briefings to campaign rallies, she proved she could hold her own in some of the most high-pressure environments imaginable. Her political career wasn't built on fame or family connections. It was built on hard work, grit, and a refusal to be silenced. That's something her supporters admire and critics, well, they find it threatening. Unapologetically faith-driven, but beyond politics and public service, Caroline stands for something deeply personal, her Christian faith. In every interview, speech, and post, she never shies away from talking about what matters most to her. And for Caroline, her faith isn't just a Sunday ritual or something to keep private. It's the core of who she is, the cross she wears around her neck. That's not an accessory. It's not a branding tactic. It's not for show. It's a daily reminder of her beliefs, her strength in adversity, and the moral compass that guides her every step. She's often said in interviews that wearing her cross reminds her of why she fights. Not for clout, but for the freedom to live by faith, speak the truth, and defend values that built this nation. So when Tom Cruise made his comment, mocking what he called her costume, it wasn't just a personal slight. It felt like an attack on the millions of Americans who share those same beliefs and feel mocked, belittled, or dismissed for expressing them publicly. The fire of the young conservative movement, and make no mistake, Caroline Leavitt is young. That's another thing that makes her stand out. In her mid-20s, she's part of a new wave of conservative leaders who are unapologetically outspoken, media-savvy, and unafraid to challenge the status quo, even when it's uncomfortable. But being young in a world of older political elites isn't easy. From media executives to Hollywood celebrities, many have tried to talk over her, underestimate her, or dismiss her altogether. They see her cross and call it attention-seeking. They see her bold stances and call it immaturity. They see her rising influence and call it dangerous. But Caroline doesn't back down. She's taken heat for defending religious liberty, for opposing radical gender ideology, and for speaking plainly about her love for God, country, and Constitution. And yet, she keeps showing up, keeps debating, keeps speaking. Why? Because she knows who she is, and she knows what she stands for. Why her response mattered so much. So when Tom Cruise made his offhand remark, it hit deeper than just a studio audience or a trending soundbite. It struck at the heart of what Caroline and millions of Americans have felt for years, that faith is no longer respected in public life, and those who display it are often ridiculed rather than revered. But Carolina didn't crumble under the pressure. She didn't play the victim, and she didn't return fire with more fire. She responded with confidence, grace, and absolute clarity. Because she knew that moment wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who's ever felt ashamed for, living their truth in a world that's trying to rewrite it. And that's what made her response unforgettable. It wasn't just what she said. It was who she was. calm, bold, unapologetic, and rooted in something deeper than fame or approval. So, before the headlines and the hashtags, before the internet erupted and the clips went viral, there was this simple truth. Caroline Leavitt didn't just wear a cross. She carried it, with strength. When Tom Cruise made that now infamous comment, a smirk-laced jab at Caroline Leavitt's cross necklace, no one in the studio quite knew how to react. The panel had been heated but respectful. Political disagreements? Sure. A few sarcastic remarks? Expected. But this felt different. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Is that necklace part of your costume, or are you just trying to get attention? It was a line meant to provoke, maybe even humiliate. The kind of line that comes from someone so confident in their celebrity status, they assume no one will dare push back. And for a brief second, just a second, it seemed like Caroline might ignore it. Let it go. Laugh awkwardly and move on. That's what many expected. But what she did next shocked everyone. Not because she retaliated with rage, but because she answered with truth. Calm, composed, clear. She leaned forward, met Tom Cruise's gaze, and without raising her voice, delivered a reply that reverberated across the country. Tom, this cross is not for attention. It represents the foundation of who I am, my faith, my values, and the millions of Americans who share them. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you're the one trying to play a role you don't believe in. Boom. The silence was thunderous. You could hear a pin drop in the studio. The energy shifted in an instant. Even the host, a seasoned broadcaster who had seen it all, looked visibly stunned. His eyes flicked nervously from Caroline to Tom, unsure of what would happen next. Tom Cruise, normally quick with a clever retort, always smooth and camera-ready, sat speechless. His smile faded. His confident posture softened. He blinked slowly, as if trying to process what had just happened. But Caroline wasn't finished. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult him. She simply told the truth, and that truth carried more power than any punchline ever could. We live in a country where we're supposed to respect freedom of religion, she said, her voice unwavering. But somewhere along the way, celebrities decided that faith is something to mock. I wear this cross proudly because I refuse to be silent about what matters most. As she spoke, something amazing happened. The audience, who moments earlier had chuckled along with Tom's sarcasm, now sat in awe. Her words didn't just fill the studio. They hit hearts. You could see it in the faces of the people watching. From the camera operators to the fellow panelists to the viewers at home glued to their screens. And then, slowly, it started. Clapping first, a few hesitant hands, then more, then louder, until it became a full-on standing ovation. For her, not for the movie star, not for the host, for Caroline Leavitt. It wasn't applause for celebrity. It was applause for courage, because what she had done, in just a few powerful sentences, was stand up for every person who's ever felt mocked for believing in something deeper than fame, money, or approval. She didn't try to make the moment about her. She made it about principle, and that's what made it unforgettable. Tom Cruise didn't respond. What could he say? The power of Caroline's words left no room for rebuttal. It wasn't a debate she won. It was a message she delivered, straight and sharp. Later, media analysts would dissect that moment frame by frame. Social media would explode with clips and quotes, but none of that could truly capture the raw power of what happened in that studio, because this wasn't just about a necklace. It was about a young woman who, under pressure and under fire, chose not to back down, not to play it safe, not to be polite when her faith was being insulted. She didn't defend herself. She defended millions who wear their faith quietly, proudly and without apology. She didn't just hold her ground, she elevated it. By the time she was done speaking, the story had flipped. The spotlight that had been on Tom Cruise shifted entirely. Caroline hadn't just spoken. She had commanded the moment, and people noticed. All across the country, people were talking. Not about what movie Cruise was promoting, but about what Caroline had said, and how she said it. Not with anger, not with ego, but with conviction. And that's something you can't act, rehearse, or fake. That's real power. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, the internet did what it does best. It exploded. Clips of the now iconic exchange between Tom Cruise and Caroline Leavitt were snipped, captioned, and shared across every major platform. The moment when Caroline calmly dismantled Cruise's mockery of her faith was too powerful and too rare not to go viral. By the end of the hour, it was everywhere. On X, formerly Twitter, hashtags like Joe Caroline Leavitt, Joe on Faith Over Fame, Tom Cruise disrespect began trending nationwide. On Instagram, reels and stories flooded timelines with the caption, "This is how you defend your values, with grace and fire." On TikTok, the clip was chopped and reshared with dramatic music, slow motion, and side-by-side reactions of people watching and gasping at Caroline's now famous response. Some users added subtitles and text overlays that read, "She didn't flinch. She didn't fold. She stood tall." It was a digital tsunami, and Caroline was right at the center of it. The reactions, praise, outrage, and everything in between. Of course, as with any viral moment, the responses were mixed, but overwhelmingly in her favor. A small group defended Tom Cruise, claiming it was just a joke or taken out of context. Some Hollywood bloggers suggested Caroline was playing the victim card for clout. But those voices were quickly drowned out by the wave of support that followed. Thousands, no, millions, praised Caroline for doing something many people struggle with, standing up for faith in a culture that often mocks it. From influencers to pastors, from political commentators to everyday Americans, her response was called a masterclass in composure, a win for every Christian who's been told to stay silent. Proof that courage doesn't need a megaphone, it just needs conviction. One viral tweet summed it up perfectly. Caroline Leavitt didn't just wear the cross, she carried it with grace and fire. Tom Cruise got schooled. That tweet alone garnered over 2 million views, 100,000 likes, and was shared by prominent voices on both sides of the political aisle. Unexpected voices joined the conversation. Then came the surprising twist. Voices who don't normally agree with Caroline politically started weighing in. A well-known liberal journalist tweeted, "I may not agree with Caroline Leavitt on much, but credit where it's due. She handled that moment with more maturity than most seasoned politicians." Another independent podcaster said, "I don't care what your beliefs are. Mocking someone's faith on live TV is low." She stood her ground and made her point without ever losing control. Respect. Suddenly, Caroline wasn't just a young, conservative commentator. She was a symbol of unshakable values in a time of cultural confusion. Even some faith leaders chimed in. A prominent evangelical pastor shared a clip of her response with the caption, "When Scripture tells us to be bold but gentle, this is what it looks like." Church groups and Christian schools began playing the clip during youth nights and discussion groups. In a world where faith is often treated as outdated or embarrassing, Caroline's stand reminded people, especially young believers, that faith isn't weakness, it's strength. A moment bigger than politics. What made the moment so powerful wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. No yelling, no theatrics, just calm, unwavering truth. That's what resonated. People didn't see a political figure or a media talking head. They saw themselves. The college student wearing a cross on campus, the working mom defending her values, the teenager afraid to speak up in class. And in Caroline's words, they found a kind of permission. Permission to be bold, to stop hiding. to wear their faith with pride. And that's what made the clip go beyond politics. Because faith, dignity, and respect, those values still matter to millions. They're just waiting for someone to say what they've been feeling. Caroline Levitt said it. And in doing so, she sparked something bigger than a viral moment. She sparked a movement. What happened between Tom Cruise and Caroline Levitt wasn't just another celebrity gaffe or a temporary viral moment. It became a flashpoint, a spark that ignited a much deeper and long overdue national conversation. In today's media-saturated culture, we're used to headlines that come and go. One day it's a scandal, the next day it's forgotten. But this moment stuck, and the reason is simple. It touched a nerve, because this wasn't about a necklace. It was about faith in public, and how far society has drifted from respecting it. For years, people of faith, especially Christians, have felt pushed to the sidelines in mainstream culture. Whether it's subtle mockery in entertainment, censorship on social platforms, or pressure in the workplace, the message has been the same. Keep your beliefs to yourself. Caroline Levitt did the opposite, and the country noticed. A culture ready for courage. Caroline's response wasn't loud or angry. It wasn't filled with political buzzwords or dramatic theatrics. It was calm, measured, and deeply personal, and that's what made it so powerful. She didn't just defend herself. She spoke for millions of Americans who quietly feel the same pressure. Don't wear the cross, don't say the prayer, don't bring your values into public view. In that moment, Caroline didn't just answer Tom Cruise. She represented a generation who are tired of feeling like their faith disqualifies them from having a voice, and that's exactly why her words echoed beyond the studio and into living rooms, churches, classrooms, and headlines across the country. This cross isn't for attention. It represents who I am. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you're the one playing a role. Those weren't just clever comebacks. They were truth bombs, dropped in a moment when many needed to hear them. Most of Tom Cruise's silence speaks volumes. As for Tom Cruise, he hasn't made any public statement since the broadcast. No interviews, no clarifications, no apologies. But sources close to the production say Cruise was caught off guard, not just by Caroline's confidence, but by the sheer volume of backlash. What he may have thought was a harmless jab quickly became a PR nightmare. People weren't laughing. They were listening, and what they heard struck a chord. Even some of his own fans criticized the comment, calling it tone-deaf and out of touch. Because mocking someone's personal faith on national television? That's not edgy. That's just disrespectful, and the fact that Cruise, one of the most media-savvy celebrities on Earth, has remained completely silent. That tells you everything. Caroline's platform skyrockets. Meanwhile, Caroline Levitt's platform has exploded. Since the interview, she's been invited to appear on national podcasts, speak at churches and conferences, and even guest host faith-based radio shows. Pastors, youth leaders, and community groups are quoting her response as an example of what it means to be bold in your beliefs. One large Christian event even gave her a standing ovation before she said a word, just for showing courage when it counted, and through it all, Caroline has kept her message simple and consistent. Never be ashamed of your faith. Never be afraid to speak truth even when it's unpopular, especially then. Her words are turning into a rallying cry, not for a political movement, but for a cultural shift where people are tired of being told to hide what matters most to them, where young people especially are looking for examples of courage, authenticity, and moral clarity in a world full of noise. A moment that meant more at the end of the day. This story wasn't about a celebrity versus a political commentator. It was about something bigger, a question that millions are asking. Is it still okay to live my faith out loud? Caroline Levitt's answer was a resounding yes, and she didn't give that answer from a pulpit or a campaign stage. She gave it while being mocked, live, on national television. And she did it with calm, strength, and unshakable conviction. That's why people remember. That's why they're still talking. That's why it matters. Because in an age of filtered, sound bites and cancel culture fear, someone finally stood up and said, "You don't have to back down. You don't have to blend in. You don't have to apologize for what you believe." And that moment, however unexpected, reminded America of something timeless. Truth doesn't need permission. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it. And that's the story of how Caroline Leavitt stood her ground and reminded the world that faith is never something to be ashamed of. If this inspired you, or made you think, do me a favor, hit that like button. Subscribe for more powerful stories, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment like this. Drop a comment below. Do you think Caroline handled it the right way? Thanks for watching, and remember, truth doesn't need permission. It just needs a voice. See you in the next one.